Hi and welcome to the Active Code podcast, brought to you by Aspire Active Partnerships. I'm Paul Griffiths and joining me each week on the pod is Luke Johnson.
Aspire Active Partnerships is a community of like-minded business leaders who all believe that collaboration in the sports coaching and children's activity sector is essential for success. We've proven that working in collaboration does benefit business growth and essentially helps more children be more active more often.
To combat physical inactivity, we need organisations that are performing at their very best. Organisations will only operate to high standards if they are led well. So, if we can focus on developing high quality leaders throughout an organisation, not just at the top, customers will experience higher quality services, which means heightened enjoyment levels and increased levels of physical activity. And if we do this at an early age, we know that we can build the foundations for a more active, happier and healthier life. The Active Code investigates what it really takes to be a successful leader and how organisations can combat physical inactivity.
We won't be alone through this journey. We are joined by business owners and experts from our sector, as well as inspirational people from outside our industry. We'll understand the importance of physical activity to our guests, reflect on leadership experiences, and gain thought-provoking insights on how we can crack the Active Code and get more children more active more often. If you like what you hear, please leave us a rating and subscribe wherever you get your pods. Our featured guest during this episode is a person passionate about making physical activity and sport accessible for all, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Hannah Crane is Director of Development at StreetGames, where she heads up the design, writing and delivery of training. Hannah's past roles include volunteering in our local community and heading up legacy management for London 2012, which focused on sustainable impact. During this episode, we'll be getting Hannah's take on how to engage the unengaged and collaborate with young people, how StreetGames see the sector progressing over the next few years, and how to overcome barriers to participation. Hannah, welcome to the Active Code podcast.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Brilliant to have you, Hannah. To start with, could you tell us a bit more about your professional journey and your current role, please?
Yes, absolutely. So I suppose in this context, my professional journey probably starts with volunteering first. So I started volunteering at the community group that I went to when I was about 14. And so I suspect hopefully I've got a lot in common with who we work with these days because of that. I didn't really get into sport until much, much later. My volunteering was all community facing. I left university and joined a financial organisation and popped around being a financial advisor for a few years. And then I lost the will to live a little bit and realised that all I really wanted to do was work in the charity sector. I was lucky enough to find an education charity that wanted me, and I learnt my trade really at that point in terms of education, training and skills through both the government agenda work and the work that this charity was doing. And then a few years after that, somebody who you had on the podcast before, I think, a gentleman called Steve Mitchell, would take credit for finding me in that charity and convincing me that sport and physical activity was the place to work. So I joined Skills Active, as it was then, and became a bit of a specialist around community sport by supporting organisations like StreetGames until Jane Ashworth took me for a coffee one day and convinced me that StreetGames was the place to be, and I joined. So I joined StreetGames in 2011. I feel very old talking about that time period now, but I joined actually as their legacy manager linked to the 2012 games, so really exciting time. And have worked in kind of different bits of the organisation, but always with a training and workforce focus, I suppose. And my job now is Director of Development, and that kind of role encompasses both our workforce, so all of the things we do around designing, writing and delivering training, but also really importantly our youth voice and youth volunteering work. And then our work with our network organisations. So the people who really do the doing are locally trusted organisation members, I suppose. And so I support the different teams who support them.
Awesome. A great varied background there, Hannah. Interesting you said about the FA route that you took. Why did you venture out of that so quickly?
I really enjoyed it. It was really challenging, but I really felt I was just making rich people richer. And it wasn't, I knew from being a really young age, I wanted to work in charity. I ended up in finance just as a kind of matter of just kind of rolling the dice, I suppose, after uni and ending up in a different city and, getting to know different people. But it was, it wasn't where it never had my heart.
Yeah. Did you pick skills up from that you look back on now and think,
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It was a great time. I learned loads, quite a lot around effective reporting and auditing and red tape. Rightly so. You can't do anything in the finance business without someone checking it and challenging it. So that was good. And also, I suppose the other side of that, some really good kind of relationship building and creativity skills. So working with people to kind of understand their goals and then how to meet them through whatever mechanisms you have in front of you.
Yeah. And interesting there, Hannah, you talked about the 2012 games legacy when you first started working for StreetGames. We're coming or ever closer drawing to Birmingham 22. And as a Birmingham-based organisation, we're obviously very passionate about what's going on in our city and the wider community. So it's been really interesting looking back. I've been to a couple of events recently, kind of post lockdowns, and it's nice to be back in the open environment with people discussing at various conferences. And inevitably, the 2012 legacy gets flagged up from people that are working on the Commonwealth Games. What's your views on that legacy that the Olympics left?
Oh, it's a big question. I think for those people involved in the games, and we were part of a program that supported local young volunteers to access volunteering opportunities at the games and to get tickets and to be there. For them, I think the legacy was very real, and I think those events and volunteering opportunities are life-changing. They provide those, mountaintop moments that young people carry with them and can be truly inspiring and can drive change. Outside of the individuals, I think it's really tough to talk about legacy, because actually how you invest in either changing facilities or in sustaining groups that exist in the area to do more, much harder to measure. So, not to say it's impossible, but harder to measure and harder to pin down causality, I think.
Yeah. So what would your tips be to the Birmingham 22 legacy people?
Reach as many young people as you can. Yeah. Like make those volunteering opportunities and tickets and points of, touch points with the game as varied and as many as possible. Because I do think that those moments can be life-changing and people carry them with them. I think if they can engage people who would normally not consider an event like that, let alone before you consider sport being for you, do you consider an event like that, in a social sense for you? Engage those people and give them an experience.
Yeah. Are there any examples from you mentioned like the workforce and the training around that and the opportunities from 2012 with some of the younger people? Are there any kind of stories or case studies that come to mind where you may still be in touch with one of those young people that has actually used the 2012 legacy to give them amazing career opportunities?
Yeah. Oh goodness, there'll be hundreds. I've got a good one from just last week though, without any staging required. We work with young volunteers, so most of the volunteering that happens linked to StreetGames is all through their community organisations. But each year we do run volunteering programs where you can engage in a kind of national element of what we absolutely do. And throughout 2012 and in the years that followed, we ran large-scale events, multi-sport festivals, as we called them. And we worked with young volunteers to plan those events, to put them on, etc. And last week I was contacted by a young lad, Jamal. I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning him. I'll send him the link to the podcast. He'll be chuffed. He was part of that young volunteering team we had back during the games. And he was brilliant then, proactive, positive, always turning up on time, always going the extra mile, staying late, and getting things done. Through that work, he went on to get work related both to our sector, but also to helping other young people. And he was in contact last week just to check in and ask for a reference for another job he's going for, back linked to one of our partner organisations. And he still speaks about that time and the contact we had with him and the work that we were able to do together as being, massive, and drove his decision to work in the sector around young people, because before that he hadn't necessarily considered that to be a career.
Awesome. Love it.
Hannah, a big focus around the podcast is about physical activity.
Mm-hmm.
What are the benefits of physical activity for you?
Well, for me personally, I'm happier if I'm managing to be active in some way. I love being out of doors, so when I can get out of doors to do activity, I tend to. Walking up hills or through woods is probably my fave at doing that. I will run when this week's cake volume requires me to, but it's not my favourite. I would not call myself a runner. And actually, I'm probably at the more dancing and music end of the genre, so I regularly I do Zumba classes a couple of times a week, and I do yoga most days, which is both for fitness and because, stop me back keeling over while I'm sat in front of a laptop all the time, but actually just because I'm calmer, happier and healthier in my mind as well when I've had that time.
And do you feel the benefits in your work life when you have been active?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Simple stuff, more able to concentrate because I am happier as well. I use some of that time out to think through knotty problems, at work. One of my colleagues recently said he runs when he puts things on the back of his hand and runs to think them out. And I've taken that tip with me. It's a good one. So yeah, definitely easier at work when I'm more able to balance my day.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. You mentioned a tip for Birmingham 2022, engaging young people. How do you engage individuals who've had negative experiences in physical activity in the projects that you deliver at StreetGames?
Oh, crucial, absolutely crucial. I think the first thing I'm going to say is we start with listening. So the community organisations that we support and that we work with will always be child-centred and young person-centred. They have to be. That's the only way you can engage with young people, let alone whether they've had a negative experience or not. We talk a lot about the doorstep sport approach. So that's what we would consider kind of high-quality community sport to contain 5 key elements, all of which are centred on that young person being kind of driving the activity and being at the centre of co-design. The 5 elements are about being putting your sessions in the right place at the right time, making sure they're at the right price so that they're accessible for all of those elements. And then we talk about right style and right leadership. So how are those sessions planned, designed and put in place? But for engagement, I would just say listen and then listen again and listen some more.
And what is the StreetGames mission?
So we've just published our 10-year strategy and reviewed our mission, actually. So it's to transform the lives of children and young people from low-income, underserved communities through sport and physical activity.
And just on that note, why is supporting those in the poorest communities at the heart of what StreetGames do?
It's always driven what we've done because it's really about equality. It's about fairness. So how do we make sure that everybody has access to the joy of sport, to what sport can bring to your life? It's not just about sport for social impact. It's about the kind of joy and added benefits that sport brings just because you're taking part in sport. All of those added things that happen that are more positive in your life because you're physically active. And actually, young people are roughly half as likely to be physically active if they live in low-income areas. That hasn't changed. The dial hasn't changed in about 40 years, unfortunately. They're half as likely to volunteer and they're half as likely to access coaching. That's massive. It's not, the stats aren't even good enough in high-income areas. So they're really not good in low-income areas. So that piece around, I suppose, equality and fairness is for us the driving force.
And you mentioned one of the 5 key elements of inclusivity being price. So would you say volunteers are vital in what you do at StreetGames?
Oh, crucial to us and the whole sector, I would have thought. The price isn't always about it being free. The price is about what's appropriate. So a good example is young people rarely expect to pay for football because you can go to the park and kick about, right? So you need to prove why your football session might cost something. However, they do get that swimming involves a whole heap of facility and infrastructure. And so they get that you're not going to be able to go for swimming for free. However, either way, volunteering is absolutely crucial to that. And for us, it's about both keeping costs low, but it's also about providing consistent and sustainable resources in those communities. The best volunteers live in those communities, they work in those communities, they know the young people they want to engage. And part of being a volunteer is quite often about making a commitment for a really long period of time. Volunteers, when they stay for years. They, stay with organisations and they commit to young people through thick and thin. They're absolutely vital.
Can we dive a bit deeper on the volunteer workforce?
Yeah.
I think a lot of organisations that we talk to on the pods and we work with, they do rely on the volunteer workforce, which is no surprise in our sector. How do StreetGames engage that volunteer workforce in the delivery of their programs? Just talk us through like the process that you use, because a lot of what we see at the moment is it's the tough side of this from my experience. I may be completely wrong here, so tell me if I am. Is the tricky thing is engaging the communities that your programs are being delivered in, to use those people from those communities to act as the leaders, as the coaches, if you like, within these programs. And I think it's, again, from my experience, I think it's probably crucial to make sure that if you are leading a group of young people, you've got more chance of them engaging in that program if they can relate to you. Social skills, I guess, are quite important from that perspective, probably more than the technical side of the sport. So how do we overcome all of those potential obstacles to engage that volunteer workforce from that community?
Well, there's quite a few elements to that. I think from a StreetGames perspective, our operations are through locally trusted organisations. So the bulk of the volunteer workforce that delivers in the communities that we support are deployed by a local organisation. And those organisations are varied, as you can imagine, in size, in scope, and in structure. How they form relationships with their individual volunteers will be different in each place, but we think is probably underpinned by an ethos, which is similar to how we engage with them. So I'm going to describe that because I think the two really align. Yeah. So when we work with a community organisation, it's a values first discussion. So why do you do what you do? How do you do what you do? What makes you get up in the morning? And StreetGames build trust with our locally trusted organisations. And I think that approach is what makes our network of community organisations so strong. I think it's what makes their workforce so strong as well. So They build trust with each other. The organisations we work with, we quite often work with more than one touch point, so we'll work with different members of the organisation. They've got all kinds of experience, but they draw from that local community. So they're building trust between themselves as a workforce. But you're absolutely right. For those young people to trust them, they don't necessarily have to look like them. They don't necessarily need to be from the same estate, but it is important. Like, actually, those are key elements. Do those young people feel connected to you? Do they think that you understand them? And an easy point to start from that is, are you from the same place? And have you got similar life experiences? Famous quote from years ago was that young people need to know that you care before they care what you know. And we think our workforce is really heavily driven by that ethos.
Just to go back as well on the community side, where you talked about the engagement and the importance of listening, and we've talked about this a few times on the pod, where I think quite often we see programs that are delivered and almost recycled in a way that don't listen to the needs of the communities. So how do StreetGames projects go through that process to ensure, because it's easy to say we listen and then we roll out a program as such, but it might seem really simple, but how do you actually go through that process of really, really listening and pulling that information all together? And then what process do you go through internally to then make that into an offer?
Yeah. It's a small word, listen, isn't it, for a fairly humongous concept in our industry. So how community groups do it will vary. When we do it, there's often a lot of pizza. I can always recommend provision of food as a key way to get young people through the door. But I think what is important is starting from a positive place of engagement. So if you're going to listen, you have to have set up a space and a time that actually young people feel they're going to be listened to. So actually, you can't plan a listening session at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, because young people will already think, that's not for me. You don't really want me there. You've not chosen that at a time I'm prepared to get out of bed for. So go to where they are. Find existing sessions or existing locations. When our community organisations are engaging new young people, they do a lot of their listening outside on the high street. Walk the streets, find them. They might be hanging outside of a takeaway. They might be kicking a ball around in the park. It is resource intensive, which I think is another issue we have in our sector. It is resource intensive to find and work with those young people. Once you've been to where they are, then you can try and bring them into where you are. Offer them a bit of pizza, offer them a fun session, offer them a free session to get involved with, and then ask them what they want and what they need. From your earlier question, they have often had a negative experience of sport. They might have had PE teachers who didn't listen to them, or they just felt not listened to, or they didn't enjoy getting sweaty, or whatever it was. So start from what it is they want. They may put sport at number 10 on the list, but they might put hanging out with my mates at number 1. Great. Well, what you've got is an opportunity for them to hang out with their mates in a different way. I think when we engage with young people nationally through our programs, we absolutely work on that principle. So we go to where they are, and then we ask them to come to us and engage in something. But we also make sure they see the developments as they're happening. So if we ask them a set of questions around how they want something to be done, we then show them back that that's what we're doing. And again, it's back to trust. We're building up confidence that they feel listened to because they're seeing us act upon it, which means when you ask them the next question or you ask them something more challenging, they're prepared to come that extra distance with you because you've built up evidence you're doing it. I think we don't ask enough in the industry about the difficult questions with young people. So if we acknowledge that in our industry, one of our biggest ongoing issues is data collection, does anyone actually ask a young person how they want their data collected, what they're prepared to give, and what they'd like to hear about? Whoever writes a research report that's targeted at a young person, this is the first time we've ever written a strategy where we've then done a young person version because we were asked for it. Young people said, oh, great, we'd love to feed into your strategy, but then what are you going to do about it and how are we ever going to know about it? So we've got to remember that when we're asking for stuff, as you and I would in any other relationship, you've got to give back, and you've got to show that what you're hearing is being acted upon.
Yeah, it really ties into. I heard John Amici a few weeks ago at the YST conference, and really, really inspiring speech. And interesting, it kind of ties into that because he spoke about that we need to speak a different language for more children to participate and young people in activity and sport. And that's thinking about the environment, and make sure that those young people feel welcomed in the environment, instead of promoting caution. And I think that really kind of talks about meet the young people where they are or where they're at, as you say at the start of this part, is crucial and often overlooked. Because if we look at this from let's say from a business perspective, and a business thinks they know their customers, but rarely actually does the business think in the customer's shoes. They always kind of have a perception of what their customers are thinking. And the danger there is that they haven't gone and asked them, and they haven't met where their customers are. So I guess it's really is the same approach, because you said at one point, Hannah, that sport can change lives, but it can change lives negatively as well if we don't do these really simple things. And I really like the idea of asking how that data should be collated, because more and more now we're in that kind of data-driven world, aren't we? And questionnaires get shoved under people's noses, and surveys and links on WhatsApps and all sorts of stuff. And we've certainly never actually had that conversation internally to how do we think those people we're dealing with want to be asked and want to respond to this data. So that's really interesting points there. Thanks for sharing that. Looking at the wider sector, how do you see the sector going at the moment? Where do you see, is it going in the right direction?
Oh, nice big question. I think the sector had an astonishing 2 years. I think we saw brilliant work and amazing progress being made by lots of organisations, and I think the innovation that happened has had really positive, lasting impacts. And I do think lots of people are building on that. I think we are seeing more creativity and more engagement in a different way. I think we're also seeing a sector which is at the beginning of a mental health crisis with our young people. And we're hearing more and more that our coaches and volunteers that we support are feeling half social worker, half coach. And that's a big challenge. I don't think we can avoid it, and I think we should embrace it. But I do think as a sector we need to think through what that means.
Sorry to interrupt you on that point, Hannah. Yeah. So we talk about, that's a really interesting point. And if we stop there and think about how does that impact on the workforce, how do you see that changing the workforce and the skills within our sector going forward, based on your insight there?
I think the increasing our knowledge and understanding of how to engage in mental health conversations, not to become experts, but to understand, those kind of initial conversations, how to spot issues, and also how to take those first steps with a young person and refer them. However, I also think we have to acknowledge that wherever we're referring them to is also in crisis at the moment. And so I do see the sector needing to get stronger and better at ongoing support, not becoming a mental health service at all, but how do we make sure that week in, week out, the sessions we're providing and the touch points we have with those young people are structured in a way that makes them feel safe, gives them somewhere they can talk to you or to others, and kind of build that into, just accept that is going to be part of what we're doing now. I think the spin-off issue for our workforce is, on top of needing more skills and more knowledge, and also possibly some behaviour change in some of our coaches, in terms of what they feel their role is. There's a support issue for them, Because if you are taking on that role, if you are supporting young people in that way, or anyone who needs that support, whatever their age, actually it's demanding. It's really mentally demanding for our coaches and volunteers. So how are we as a sector thinking about that early? Because the risk is we lose more of a workforce who feel they don't have the skills and understanding, but then also just can't cope with that going forward. So I think it's really important to consider the infrastructure we're putting in place to support people into the future.
And at StreetGames, are there any strategies you're looking to implement over the coming years to help combat or offer that support to your workforce and volunteers?
Yeah, so we've already got some training that we offer. We're developing more, both around supporting people who are working with young people with skills and knowledge, but also running workshops which are about understanding your own well-being and helping give coaches the skills to run mini well-being sessions. So how do you spend 5 minutes before you go out into the multi-use games area to just talk and think about this, or do you give space for it? So we're already putting in place some training around that stuff. We're developing more resources. We've got a couple of partnerships which we're hoping will be kind of more formally announced later this year, but always open for more if anyone wants to work on this. And then we're just going out at the moment actually to recruit a youth panel from across England who will inform over the next 18 months by just coming back to us and telling us kind of over that period of time their experiences and sharing what they're seeing and hearing from their peers, so that we've got some really up-to-date kind of information about their experience, both of mental health but also of accessing mental health services or just general services. So who are they coming into contact with, what's working and what's not working.
And Hannah, on the workforce retention side of things, we hear from lots of organisations in the sector that post-pandemic, even though we are still in a pandemic, but coming back to normality, let's call it that, there's headaches there around the retention of their workforce, in particular the delivery workforce, let's call it the coaching workforce that are out there working with young people and children. Is that something that you've experienced in the last few months as an organisation or with your contacts? And if so, how do we then start to overcome these issues before they potentially spiral out of control and we end up with a demand for services but a workforce that isn't quite there to meet that demand immediately? And it is needed immediately from what you've been saying.
Yeah, I think actually our initial kind of big workforce shift happened after that first lockdown. That's when we saw the biggest change. In the few months after lockdown, our organisations really, you could split them into three groups. Either they shut down and they couldn't open again until much later in 2020, like just for whatever reason. Either they were small organisations pivoting on one person and that person just wasn't available, and or they had a more vulnerable workforce, they lost their venue to whatever else was happening at the time, etc. So a whole third of organisations really just shut down for quite a few months. Most of them were back up and running by last summer, so they were recovering in different forms, some of them, and still, I suppose, the ones that were most at risk were those that had been relying on one or two key individuals. So we definitely have seen a loss in that space. Our second group of organisations did what they'd always done, but did it deeper and differently. So loads of our organisations went out and continued to engage with young people, took the concept of doorstep sport to its ultimate extreme by doing it on the doorsteps of people up and down streets or wherever was appropriate for them. And again, they recovered pretty well and pretty quickly. Although, I'd hate to have this out in the open without always saying that all community groups need more money all of the time. I'm sure they'll be wringing their hands if they're listening. But the third group was a different challenge and an interesting workforce challenge, which is that they diversified what they were doing. So a third of all of the community groups we were working with in March 2020 stopped just delivering sport week in, week out, and started delivering other community sessions. Loads moved into food delivery, supporting food banks, doing more emergency support with families and young people with kind of urgent issues occurring. The challenge that they've had is that they don't want to step back from that work, but they've still only got the size of workforce at best that they had when they started. And so they're now struggling to recruit. So not necessarily that they've lost people, but they're struggling to recruit into what is a growing organisation now that they've taken on this broader community remit. I think those are the biggest. So we're lucky. We've got a network survey out at the moment, so we'll have more data in a couple of months' time. But we haven't seen a mass loss of volunteers, as I know have been seen in some other parts of the sector and parts of the youth sector as well. But I think part of that is, as I say, because it was organisations either kept going and therefore those volunteers and community leaders knew they were needed and felt engaged, or where we've lost people, it's because those organisations were creaking on one or two people already.
Yeah, recruitment across our network, it's a big headache at the moment. Struggling to get people to apply, kind of let alone touching on the quality. On the participation point of view, it can sometimes be tricky to ramp up participation in projects. For organisation working towards similar goals to yourself, do you have any top tips for engaging communities in projects and initiatives?
Well, I'm going to reuse the magic word listen, but yeah, definitely. So I think we're at risk of using the phrase co-design too easily in this sector and in others. This isn't just a sport issue. But co-design is crucial, really, for working with any group, but in particular with communities that might already feel distanced or not listened to, or that they were listened to for a bit and then the doors shut and the services were taken away again. So I would say co-design genuinely. So don't go with this is probably what we want to do and we're going to let them twiddle around the edges, or we might let them design the brand. Like, go with blank piece of paper to understand what's needed. You can make sport the solution, but understand what's needed first. Because actually, if what's happening in the area is that people don't feel safe, or if what's happening in the area is that loads of people have lost jobs, you need to understand that before you decide, well, actually, I'm going to run basketball at 6 o'clock on a Thursday. Now, basketball at 6 o'clock on Thursday might be a brilliant solution, both to people feeling safe and to giving people something to do when they're feeling lost after having become unemployed. But you need to start with what they genuinely need first. You mentioned it earlier, it can be resource heavy. It's time and spend heavy to listen and to react to what you're hearing properly. But if you don't do that, your project won't achieve what it needs to. So it is front-end funding in that sense of getting it right.
And am I right in thinking it's a bit of an ongoing process as well? So not just in the setup of initiative or a project, but having regular focus groups with those participants to ensure that you're constantly innovating and making it more appealing to attend.
Yeah, definitely. Focus groups is absolutely one way. Week in, week evaluation. So the good coaches will evaluate every single session in some way, shape, or form, and you can do that, with young people or children in 100 different ways. You see all kinds of creative ideas on how to do it, but you want that feedback on a regular basis, and that could be checking in about the formal stuff. Back to the comment about what we're asking young people, whether we're asking them the difficult questions. It's not just about, was this session fun? Do you want a longer warm up, or do you want, a better phone break? It's also about, did we get it right? Is the venue okay? Did you feel safe when you got here? Do you need someone to be here a bit earlier so that you've got somewhere to come to? Were the lights all right? It's all of that stuff that makes people feel that the session is designed for them and safe for them.
And what exciting projects are StreetGames focusing on over the next few years?
So, linked to the legacy question earlier, we've got a whole kind of Inspiration 2022 programme we're going to be running this year. The Commonwealth Games is going to be central to it, but there's loads of exciting events as ever in the UK. We're very lucky. So we'll be linking to the Women's Euros, to the Rugby League World Cup, and to the Commonwealth Games, as I say. All opportunities really to help our young people have those kind of mountaintop moments. So we'll be thinking about getting them there. So we've got some tickets for the Commonwealth Games. We're very excited. We're going to take young people to it. But also, how do they link that back to their sessions locally? So we've run something called pop-up clubs before. So the idea is that you link to something that you're watching on TV, and then you do that activity in your local community, and you use that big event to engage people. So Inspiration 2022. I've mentioned already the kind of mental health panel with young people. We're really excited about how we build on that over the next 18 months. And we're also going to be expanding. We've got a program called Next Gen, which is all about developing our young leaders of tomorrow. We've been delivering it in different regions across England over the last couple of years, but we're really looking to expand that now so that young people have got those pathways through to leadership.
Brilliant, and best of luck for those programs. And it sounds like a busy year coming up for you.
Indeed.
Let's talk about the leadership side of things. Are there free books or podcasts that you would recommend to our listeners to help enhance their leadership skills?
Well, I'm gonna stick on my theme about listening. So they're not necessarily books or podcasts about leadership, but they're about hearing and understanding the world from different perspectives. So there's a book called Poverty Safari, which is written by Darren McGarvey. If I've pronounced that wrong, I'm terribly sorry. I haven't got it in front of me, but that it's a story of his own life experience, both as somebody who came from a tough part of Glasgow but has grown up and worked in the industry, and it asks tough questions. It's a good one. It really gets you to think about who you're working with and whether you're listening. There's a good podcast I've just started listening to called Media Storm. It might only be a couple of months old actually, but it's about current news and current affairs, but again trying to give voice to the people who don't always get a voice in mainstream media. So neither of those are about leadership, but I think they're about expanding your mind so that you can be a better leader, because those listening to people you don't want to hear from or that you don't always get a chance to hear from is tough. And so those would be my recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, completely agree on that. I think you've got to put yourself out there and be uncomfortable at times to help develop those skills and the knowledge that you have. So the Active Code podcast is all about how can we find the solution for getting more children more active more often. There's lots that we need to do, but if you could pinpoint one thing, what would be that one thing that we think we need to do better as a whole sector to crack the Active Code?
I think we need to change the point of access. I think we need to be really honest about how tough it is to choose sport. It shouldn't be easier to order KFC than it is to book a football session, but it is. So how are you, whether you're a big organisation or a small organisation, making that first point of contact as easy as possible so that someone can walk in, pick up the phone, or sign in digitally if that's their choice. But actually, that isn't, it's not everyone's first choice, that piece. So how do you make access central to what you do?
And Hannah, how can listeners connect and get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to find me on there. And if they're interested in working with StreetGames, we're always looking for partners and collaborators. There's a join us section on our website. So either find me on LinkedIn or you can find us as an organisation through our website.
Great stuff. Thanks, Anna. Really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure. It's gone very quickly as well.
It has.
It's been really good to kind of learn your story and that volunteering background and how it's really influenced what you're doing today and the great work that you have done over the last 10 years and continue to do at StreetGames. Some really, really good pointers there. We spoke about listening a lot, and I found myself intently listening today and scribbling down lots of notes. So yeah, that's the big takeaway for me, is really the kind of the importance of like really, really listening. So thank you so much. Like I said earlier, you've got a busy 22 by the sound of it. We're almost coming up to the summer. So I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be a really busy summer for you guys, and I wish you all the very best and continue to do the great work that you do with all the young people all around the country. So thanks for your time, really appreciate it, and take care and speak soon.
Thank you very much, great to be here.
Join us next time for the Active Code podcast. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with us on Twitter @aspire_partners and find out more about us and the network at www.aspireactivepartnerships.co.uk.